I worked for a company that specialized in crime scene and extreme property cleanup. It wasn't glamorous work. Most people imagine cleaners arriving while detectives are still investigating. That wasn't how it worked. By the time we arrived, the police were usually gone. The evidence had been collected. The scene had been documented. Whatever happened inside the property was already over. Our job was to deal with what remained: blood, contaminated flooring, damaged furniture, odors, anything that couldn't be handled by a normal cleaning company. I'd been doing the job for almost 3 years when I received an assignment at a small rental house outside the city. There had been a violent death inside. The landlord wanted the property cleaned as quickly as possible because he planned to put it back on the rental market. When I arrived, the house looked ordinary. Small front yard, 2 floors, white siding. Nothing about it suggested that something terrible had happened there. The landlord met me outside. He handed me the keys and gave me a quick explanation. Most of the house was already cleared. The bedroom upstairs was the main area that needed attention. Before I went inside, he said something that didn't seem important at the time. "Don't worry about the paint." I asked what he meant. He pointed toward the upstairs window. That room was painted recently. I assumed he meant the previous tenant had painted it. I didn't ask any more questions. Inside, the house smelled faintly of disinfectant. The living room was mostly empty. The kitchen had been cleaned. The hallway carpet had already been removed in several places. I went upstairs. There were 3 bedrooms. 2 looked completely normal. The third immediately stood out. The entire room had been freshly painted. Not just one wall. Everything. The walls. The trim. Even the ceiling. The paint was so fresh that I could still smell it. I asked the landlord why that room had been painted while the rest of the house hadn't. He shrugged. Probably the previous owner. I accepted that explanation. I started working in the hallway first. Part of the carpet had been damaged during the incident, so I began removing the remaining sections. That's when I noticed something strange. The freshly painted bedroom was the only room upstairs without a working electrical outlet. I checked the wall. Nothing. No power. No obvious wiring. I found an outlet cover near the baseboard and removed it. Behind it was nothing but a shallow, empty cavity. I ran my hand along the wall. Then I noticed one section sounded different when I tapped it. Most of the wall gave me a solid knock. This section gave me a hollow sound. I tapped it again. Hollow. I figured there was probably some old construction space behind it. I wasn't a contractor. It wasn't my job to open walls, so I left it alone. The next morning, I received a call from the landlord. He asked, "Did you clean behind the bedroom wall?" I thought he was joking. "No." There was a pause. Then he said, "Good." I asked him why he'd asked. He didn't answer immediately. Finally, he said that another cleaning company had worked on the property before us. They had apparently discovered something behind that wall. According to him, they refused to finish the job. I asked what they found. He said he didn't know. That answer bothered me. If he didn't know, why was he so nervous? I asked if the police had inspected the wall. He said yes. Then he changed the subject. Later that afternoon, he asked me to return to the house. When I arrived, something immediately looked different. The bedroom walls were still freshly painted, but one section near the corner had started peeling. I walked over. The paint came away much easier than it should have. Underneath was another layer of paint. I scraped a little more, another layer, then another, and another. It looked like someone had repeatedly painted over the same section of wall. I kept removing small pieces. Eventually, I reached an older layer. There was something underneath it. Writing. At first, I thought it was random graffiti. Then I realized they were names, hundreds of them, written in different handwriting. Some were crossed out. Some had dates beside them. Others had short notes. I stared at the wall. I recognized one of the names. Then another. They were people I'd seen in old newspaper articles. Missing persons. People who had disappeared from the area years earlier. I stepped away from the wall. I took photographs, then called my supervisor. Before I could explain what I'd found, I heard the front door open downstairs. The landlord had arrived. He came upstairs and stopped in the doorway. He saw the exposed wall. His face changed immediately. He didn't ask what I had found. He didn't ask how many names there were. He simply stared, then quietly said, "That writing wasn't there yesterday." I looked back at the wall. The names were still there, hundreds of them. I told him that wasn't possible. I'd only removed the paint. The writing had clearly been underneath it. He didn't respond. Then I noticed something I'd missed. Near the bottom of the wall was a section that looked completely different. The handwriting was darker, cleaner, fresh. I crouched down. There was one name. Just one. Mine. For several seconds, I couldn't move. I checked the spelling. It was correct. My full name, written in the same dark ink as the other names. Then I noticed the date beside it. It wasn't today's date. It was tomorrow's. I looked at the landlord. He was staring at the wall too. Neither of us said anything. I stepped backward. My supervisor was still on the phone. I could hear him asking what was happening. I couldn't answer, because while I was standing there, the landlord suddenly whispered, "Don't touch it." I looked at the wall again. The paint around my name was still wet. I hadn't touched that section. Nobody had. And there was one thing I hadn't noticed before. Below my name, there was enough empty space for another name. I had been working as a crime scene cleaner for almost 3 years when I received a late-night emergency call about a vacant house outside the city. The assignment itself wasn't unusual. A property had apparently been cleaned by another company earlier that week, but the crew had been unable to finish. The company wanted someone to go back, inspect the property, and complete whatever remained. My supervisor told me it should be easy, probably a couple of hours. I arrived just after midnight. The house was completely dark. There were no cars in the driveway, no lights in the windows. The front door was unlocked, exactly as the instructions said it would be. I stepped inside with my equipment. The first thing I noticed was how clean everything was. Not mostly clean, spotless. The living room had no furniture. The floors had been professionally scrubbed. The walls had been disinfected. There was no blood, no damaged carpet, no smell. Nothing that looked remotely like a property requiring an emergency cleanup. I called my supervisor. "I think they sent me to the wrong house." He checked the address. "No, you're there. There's nothing to clean." He paused, then said, "Check the basement before you leave." I didn't understand why, but I agreed. I found the basement stairs near the kitchen. The basement was almost completely empty. There was an old washing machine against one wall, and a floor drain in the center of the concrete. The air smelled faintly of disinfectant. I assumed the previous crew had used chemicals down there. I started documenting the room. That's when I noticed the footprints. They were faint, but clearly visible. A single set of footprints crossed the concrete floor. They weren't bloody. They weren't dirty. They looked like someone had walked through a wet cleaning solution. The strange part was that they were perfectly defined. Every shoe tread was visible. I followed them with my eyes. They started beside the floor drain, then crossed the basement, then stopped at the bottom of the stairs. There were no footprints on the stairs, nothing beyond them. I took several photographs and sent them to my supervisor. He called me less than a minute later. His voice sounded different. "Leave the house." I thought he was joking. "What?" "Pack everything up. Don't clean anything. Lock the door behind you and leave." I asked him why. He wouldn't tell me. He just repeated the instruction. I did what he said. As I was walking toward the front door, I looked back at the basement stairs one last time. The footprints were still there. I locked the house and drove home. The following morning, I asked my supervisor what had happened. He finally explained. The previous cleaning crew had reported the same footprints. They'd appeared after the crew had finished cleaning the basement. At first, the company assumed someone had walked through the wet chemicals, but the crew insisted nobody had been downstairs after the floor was cleaned. They took photographs. Then they cleaned the floor again. The footprints appeared again, in exactly the same place. The company sent another employee to inspect the basement. He found nothing. The first crew refused to return. My supervisor had assumed they were exaggerating, until I photographed the same footprints. I asked him what happened to the property. He said the owner had sold it. I assumed that was the end of the story. A few days later, I received another assignment, different address, different neighborhood, different house. I didn't think about the previous property again until I opened the work order. The description was short. Basement cleanup, previous contractor unavailable. I stared at the screen, then checked the address. It wasn't the same house. It wasn't even close. I almost called my supervisor. Instead, I drove there. The property was a small older house with a detached garage. I unlocked the door and went inside. Everything looked normal. The kitchen needed cleaning. The hallway carpet needed treatment. The basement needed the most work. I walked downstairs. The basement was unfinished. Concrete floor, old furnace, storage shelves, a drain in the center. I stopped. There were footprints on the floor. Fresh ones, perfectly visible. A single set, starting beside the drain. I stood completely still. They looked exactly like the footprints from the previous house. Same tread, same size, same direction. I called my supervisor. He answered immediately. I said, "They're here." He didn't ask what I meant. There was silence. Then he said, "Don't follow them." I looked down. This time, the footprints didn't stop at the bottom of the stairs. They continued across the basement, up the steps, across the kitchen, through the hallway, and toward the front door. I hadn't made any of them. Nobody else was inside. I slowly backed away. The footprints continued right up to the front door. I could see the final shoe print pressed against the concrete threshold. I looked at the door. It was locked from the inside. I checked the deadbolt, still engaged. The chain was still attached. Nobody had opened it, yet the footprints ended there. I called my supervisor again. No answer. I tried once more, still nothing. I grabbed my equipment and started toward the stairs. Then I heard a faint sound behind me. Not a voice, not a footstep, just the soft squeak of rubber against wet concrete. I turned around, nothing. The footprints were still there, but now, there was one more, a fresh shoe print, at the bottom of the stairs, facing me. I didn't wait to see another. I unlocked the front door, ran outside, and stood in the driveway until my supervisor finally called back. He didn't ask what happened. He only said, "Don't go back inside." I asked him how many properties had reported the footprints. He was silent for several seconds, then said, 3. I asked him where the other 2 were. He gave me the addresses. The first was the house I'd cleaned. The second was the property from the previous week. The third was the house I had just left. Then he said something that made me stop breathing for a second. There had been a 4th address, an apartment. The cleaning company had received the job that morning. Nobody had gone there yet, but the supervisor had already received a photograph from the property manager. It showed the basement floor, and beside the drain was a single fresh footprint, still wet. I had been working as a crime scene cleaner for a little over 2 years when I got an emergency assignment around 1:30 in the morning. Those calls weren't unusual. When something happened late at night, our company sometimes sent cleaners out immediately so the property could be secured and treated before morning. The job sheet gave me an apartment number, an access code, and a short description. Biohazard cleanup, bedroom, do not disturb remaining property. Nothing else. The apartment complex was an older building on the edge of town. Most of the windows were dark. The parking lot was nearly empty. I found the building listed on the work order, entered the access code, and went inside. The apartment itself looked completely normal. That was actually the first thing that bothered me. There were clothes hanging in the bedroom, food in the refrigerator, mail scattered across the kitchen counter, a half-finished cup of coffee beside the sink. It looked like someone had simply left for work that morning. I checked the bedroom. That's where the cleanup was supposed to happen. I put on my protective equipment and started working. For the next several hours, nothing unusual happened. No strange noises, no movement, no interruptions, just the normal sounds of cleaning equipment and the building settling around me. Around 4 in the morning, I finished. I called the company dispatcher to confirm the job was complete. She asked for the address. I read it from the work order. There was a long silence. Then she said, "You're at the wrong building." I laughed because I thought she'd made a mistake. "No, I'm looking at the apartment number right now." She asked me to send her a photograph. I took one of the apartment door and sent it. A few seconds later, she called back. Her voice sounded completely different. "Leave the apartment." I stopped. "What?" "Don't touch anything else. Just leave." I asked her what was wrong. She said the address attached to my assignment was in a completely different city. I checked the original work order again. The address printed on the paper was exactly the building I was standing inside. I sent her another photograph. This time, she stopped responding. I tried calling. Nothing. I stood in the kitchen staring at my phone. Something suddenly felt very wrong. I started walking toward the front door. That's when I noticed the shoes. There were 2 pairs beside the entrance. One pair belonged to me. The other was a pair of work boots. Dark. Heavy. Still damp. I crouched down. There was a faint residue on the soles. The same cleaning chemical I'd been using in the bedroom. I knew those boots hadn't been there when I arrived. I would have noticed them. I called the dispatcher again. Someone finally answered. But it wasn't her. It was my supervisor. The first thing he asked was, "Did you find the other cleaner?" I said no. He went quiet. Then he explained that another employee had been assigned to the same apartment 3 hours earlier. That employee had never checked in. Nobody had been able to reach him. I looked at the work boots again. I asked my supervisor if the missing employee had been wearing them. He said he didn't know. Then I noticed something on the kitchen counter, a second job sheet. It was partly covered by a stack of mail. I picked it up. Same company, same apartment number, same date. But underneath the cleaner's name was another name. The missing employee. At the bottom of the sheet was a handwritten instruction. "Do not enter the bedroom alone." I stared at those words. I'd already spent nearly 3 hours inside that bedroom, alone. I asked my supervisor why that warning wasn't on my work order. He didn't answer. Instead, he told me to leave the apartment immediately. I started toward the door. Then I heard a loud metal crash upstairs. I froze. The apartment didn't have an upstairs. The sound had come from somewhere above the bedroom. I looked toward the ceiling. Another crash, much louder. I grabbed my equipment and ran outside. I waited in the parking lot until my supervisor arrived. When he got there, we went back inside together. The apartment was exactly as I'd left it. The boots were gone. The second job sheet was still on the counter. We searched every room, closets, bathroom, kitchen, bedroom. There was no sign of the missing cleaner. Then my supervisor stopped in the bedroom doorway. He was staring at the wall. I walked over. One section of the wall had been freshly cleaned. Everything surrounding it was dusty. The clean section was roughly the shape of a person standing against the wall. It looked as if someone had been pressed against it for a very long time. My supervisor turned toward me. "Did you clean this?" I shook my head. "No." He stared at the wall for another few seconds, then quietly said, "Neither did he." I asked what he meant. He didn't answer. Instead, he pulled out his phone and called the company again. While he was talking, I noticed something on the floor beneath the cleaned section. A small piece of disposable glove. Our company used that exact type. I picked it up. My supervisor immediately told me to put it down. I asked him why. He looked at me and said, "Because that's the same glove the missing cleaner was wearing when he left the office." We left the apartment after that. I never learned what happened to him. The company eventually stopped sending employees to that building. But there is one detail from that night I still can't explain. When I first entered the apartment, the bedroom door was closed. I remember opening it myself. But according to the missing cleaner's worksheet, he had already entered that room before I arrived. And the final line on his paperwork wasn't written by him. It was written underneath his signature. "Do not enter the bedroom alone." Someone had added it after he had already gone inside.